Hello and welcome to KARE 11 On the Record. I'm political reporter Danny Spiewak. This week, lawmakers will return to the state capitol in St. Paul for the start of the 2026 legislative session, the first time they're all officially meeting together since the targeted lawmaker shootings back in June and the murder of Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark. This week, we sat down with one of Hortman's closest friends in the legislature, DFL State Senate Majority Leader Erin Murphy, to talk about what the first day on Tuesday is going to look like and the rest of the session. Well, Leader Murphy, thank you for taking a few minutes today. We appreciate it.
Of course.
I just want to start on a personal note as you prepare for session on Tuesday. So much has happened since you left last June from the last session. Just what are your emotions going to be like coming into the Capitol?
I think it's going to be a really difficult day, the first day. And as we get closer, and the work that we have done through the course of the interim is replaced with the idea that we're going to come back. I'm feeling it, to be really honest with you. And people are sending photos of Melissa and me together, or Melissa in different places. And, you know, it's going to be bittersweet because we're going to have Senator Hoffman back and back in the chamber. And we're really happy about that. And we'll also memorialize Melissa and Mark. And I think that's both right and good. But it isn't just the loss of friends, colleagues, and their lives, but also a sense of innocence here. That not that we were completely protected, but this was a place that was open and safe. And it is going to be open, and we've worked very hard to increase measures so that people can come and feel safe and participate. But I don't think any of us will ever forget what happened on June 14th. And it is shifted us, and I think it'll shift us for good. So I'm thinking a lot about the day and what it means and coming in to do the work for the people of Minnesota.
When you get into the regular business of the Senate, I assume the ICE operations are going to be top of mind. What right now are Senate DFL or Senate Democrats looking at in terms of legislation to respond to the immigration enforcement?
It has been an incredible experience, very, very difficult in Minnesota. And Minnesotans have risen to the moment in a really profound way. My colleagues do have a number of ideas. I think you'll see legislation to ban masks. You'll see legislation dealing with essential spaces like schools and child care centers where ICE should not be allowed. I'm going to carry legislation that requires federal agents, like every other Minnesotan in this state, be required to render aid if they harm somebody with a weapon. I don't understand why they could allow Renee Mecklengood to die in her car when there was a physician there ready to provide CPR. And we have laws in the state of Minnesota, and I think they should follow them. So we're going to make sure that we take action on that as well. I think you'll see a number of proposals. I hope we're able to move them through the House. We'll see about that.
With the House still tied, do you believe Republicans would support any of these initiatives?
Well, they should. What we have seen from this federal government in this last month is a real attack on our state sovereignty, on people's human and civil rights, on the Constitution. None of us should stand for that. Doesn't matter who's in the White House. We should all reject that. And so I invite my colleagues, both in the House and the Senate, the Republicans, to join us in this.
I'm sure Republicans will come forward with similar legislation that they had last session related to cooperation between local and federal authorities. We just commissioned a poll with NBC that showed actually there was a fair amount of support for coordination between local, state, and federal authorities. Would you support any measure that would increase that cooperation?
So one of the frustrating points of this last month or so, or two, I suppose, is this idea that the state was not cooperating with, that people weren't cooperating with law enforcement, especially around detainers. That has been the state's posture, but the federal government hasn't been clear about that. And so I think that, Minnesotans rightfully support that, but I think Minnesota officials are supporting that as well.
When it comes to some of the county jails, would you support rolling back any of the sanctuary policies that any of the cities have on the books or the counties?
So I think it is important that we recognize that people have due process rights and that we don't erode those due process rights. And when I listen to the federal officials talking about county jails, I think they're talking about eroding people's due process rights. That we shouldn't stand for. I don't think Americans or Minnesotans would stand for that. Short of that, I think there's plenty of room for cooperation.
Moving to another subject, of course, there was never a special session related to gun violence after the horrific tragedy at Annunciation Church. I assume fairly quickly you're going to be introducing an assault weapons ban.
You will see, I think, legislation that comes out of the 2 hearings that we had in the Minnesota Senate after those horrific shootings. You'll recall that my colleagues produced a number of pieces of legislation dealing with guns, with an assault weapons ban, with ghost guns, but also on mental health and school safety. That package, I think you will see come through the Judiciary Committee to the floor. The Republicans came with nothing really to that hearing, and I'm not quite sure what they'll do, but the Annunciation families in that community has really galvanized, and they are organized. I think you're going to see them here at the Capitol and present. And my colleagues, especially those representing that community, are very determined to take action.
When this came up in the late summer, I know it was questionable whether Senate DFLers had the votes to pass an assault weapons ban. Right now, would you have the votes to pass that ban?
You know, in 2013, when we had full governing power, there was an effort to move a set of policies, and it failed. Many of those policies we passed back in 2023, so universal background checks, red flag laws, et cetera. But one of the things I regret about that year is not taking a vote because people were divided on it. I think Minnesotans want us to take a vote. And I think people should vote their districts and they should vote their conscience. But I think we should take a vote.
And with the 1-seat majority, do you think it would pass?
We will see. I think my colleagues who have done a lot of work since that shooting at Annunciation to understand the policies, to participate in the drafting, we'll see things come through the committee and they'll make a decision then.
The other issue that I'm sure will be top of mind in the session is fraud, just given all the attention around it nationally. Do you believe the Inspector General proposal will move forward again this year, and would it have any chance in the House?
So, we passed it. Heather Gustafson has done a tremendous job on that piece of legislation, 60 votes in the Minnesota Senate, and we sent it over to the House. It should go through the hearing process. It needs to go through the hearing process. That is how we get to a conference committee to see if we can get something passed and sent to the governor. So I hope they take action.
I asked this question of Leader Stevenson in the House a couple of weeks ago because of the attention around fraud. In retrospect, looking at the way the Walz administration handled the issue, really dating back to the beginning of COVID, was there more pressure that DFL legislative leaders should have placed on the governor to institute firings or take swifter action for the public?
So we, since 2023, have passed a number of pieces of legislation on the issue of fraud. We knew that there was an emerging problem, so rather than pressure the administration, we took our own action, gave the Attorney General and the governor more tools to withhold payments or to stop payments if necessary. We reformed programs. It is like 5 pages worth of very unsexy work that has strengthened our programs, and I think you'll see one more iteration of that. In addition to the hopeful action on the part of the House on the OIG, you will see us do a little more work around those 14 programs that are at risk to make sure that the legislatures that have passed that policy over the last 10 or 15 years, that we tighten that up, that we make it more transparent, that we make it more standardized, and protect it from fraudulent actors.
And I know it's a bonding year, and you did a bill last year, but do you expect that the parties can come together and pass another bonding bill?
We asked at the end of last session when we agreed to the smaller bonding bill for everyone's agreement to take up a bonding bill this year. We are very, very committed to that. The Republicans at the time said they didn't want to make that agreement because they want to use it to negotiate. I hope that we reach an agreement early that we should move a significant bonding bill for our communities across the state, and we don't use it as a political tool. We're not going to use it as a political tool. I hope my colleagues agree.
I'll just ask one more question. Heading into session, as we talked about the emotions around the first day, how would you say it's changed the relationship between the parties, Democrats and Republicans? Has it brought you closer together at all, given what you've been through since June?
I think the work that we did together in 2025 did bring us closer together, beginning with the loss of Carrie Dietzich in a power sharing agreement, Leader Johnson and I have a good working relationship, and we have stayed in touch and spent time together in the interim. That is a good thing. I also know that we are experiencing a heightened level of political violence and political threat. More of our members are getting death threats. And it is a serious matter, and some of it is triggered by our own actions, right? We saw what we call doxing a couple of weeks ago, where people who had been participating in their communities to support their communities' mutual aid had their phone numbers and their signal chats released to the public. After the murder of Charlie Kirk, which was tragic, I had a colleague who had retweeted something, and that retweet was sent out to the nation and social media, and she experienced death threats that were actionable. That's where I think we have common ground to find and work to do together. We have to disagree with we have to disagree with one another. It is a part of how we govern. We find our way through to compromise by sharing our different points of view, but we don't have to threaten each other, and we don't have to call each other out in such a way that puts people at risk. There is work for us to grow there, especially in the wake of what we experienced on June 14th.
Okay. Thank you for your time. Appreciate
You're welcome. Thank you.
With the Minnesota legislature returning to session for the 2026 session on Tuesday, new polling from NBC News Decision Desk, KARE 11, and the Minnesota Star Tribune shows that the overwhelming majority of Minnesotans oppose the way ICE and Border Patrol have carried out their operations here in Minnesota over the past several weeks. And I'm joined now by Marc Trussler, a senior elections analyst on the NBC News Decision Desk, to talk about some of these results. Marc, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So, Marc, I want to start with just the numbers in Minnesota. It appeared that about 2/3 of respondents in this survey felt that ICE had gone too far in their Operation Metro Surge here. Can you break down those results for us a little bit?
Yeah, we've seen, across the board on the numbers in Minnesota that people feel negative towards the actions of ICE and DHS more broadly in Minnesota. That whether we look at the overall approval for ICE, overall approval for Trump's immigration program, or on topics like whether ICE agents should wear masks, the majority of Minnesotans are not in favor of these things.
Did it appear that the public sentiment in Minnesota was similar to polling done around the country as well?
The overall numbers look the same, but there's something interesting within it, is that this activity in Minnesota has served to galvanize Minnesotans. That when we look at strong approval and strong disapproval on things like ICE, on things like Trump immigration, we see that Minnesotans have moved to the edges, more strong approval and more strong disapproval. So when you look at the averages, they're pretty much the same as the United States as a whole, but really the people in Minnesota have been polarized by this action.
What has the polling shown around President Trump in support for his policies around immigration? Obviously, that was a huge part of the 2024 presidential election. What have the numbers looked like in his second term here?
Yeah, so we've been running this NBC News decision poll nationwide since June of this year. And the poll that we've done now in January and February is really the largest change we've seen in the time that we've been doing this. Looking specifically at Trump's numbers on handling of the immigration, we've seen that since April, 15 percentage points more people strongly disapprove of the president's handling of immigration compared to the spring. And really, almost all of that shift has happened since August. And I think that's really noteworthy because if you think about everything that happened from the beginning of Trump's term to August in terms of, different policies around visas, surges of ICE in Los Angeles and Chicago, none of those things dramatically moved the needle on the Americans' feelings towards Trump's handling of immigration. Really, what has changed since August is the action in Minneapolis. And there we've seen, in response to the chaotic scenes in Minneapolis and the shooting of and killing of two American citizens, a huge change in how the public feels about Trump's handling of immigration. 15 percentage points more strongly disagree. Amongst political independents, it's been a 20-point shift since April towards strongly disagree.
One thing that was also interesting about the results is in Minnesota, looking at public opinion around whether ICE should be abolished or reform, it appeared that more people favored reform than abolish. What do you make of those results?
I think that's right. And I think we have to be a little bit careful there, where I'm sure when Democrats are saying reform and Republicans are saying reform, they're saying different things. around about a quarter of people say abolish, another quarter say that it should stay as it is, and then it's kind of that middle group that that 40-50% who say reform. That's really kind of where the open question is. I think at the very least, the fact that people are at least saying reform, and a significant number of Republicans in Minnesota and nationwide are saying reform, suggests that the Trump administration has miscalibrated what mandate they had over immigration coming into their term.
It appeared as well in the Minnesota results, at least, that more people also favored some kind of cooperation between local police and federal immigration authorities. Did that surprise you at all?
No, nothing surprises me. I'm just here to read the numbers. I do think we see that, in line with this idea that the Trump administration did come in with a mandate of moving in a more conservative direction on immigration compared to the Biden administration. The American people are not saying that, we wish to abolish ICE. We wish to have local police absolutely never cooperate with immigration action. We're seeing, as I said, that the American people are telling the Trump administration, you miscalibrated here. This is too extreme. However, I think that when they say, we still want our local police to work with immigration enforcement when necessary within the bounds of reforming ICE into a different sort of organization.
The last question I want to ask you is just around the methodology. For viewers that are unfamiliar with the way these types of polls work, just explain the representative sample and how you come to these results and how you come up with the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So this poll is weighted nationwide to be representative of the nation, and then weighted separately to be representative of Minnesota, right? So making sure we have the right number of young people and old people, high and low educated people, the right number of Trump voters, Harris voters, and people who didn't vote, as well as within Minnesota being representative of the right number of people in the Twin Cities, the Twin City suburbs, and the rest of the state. So these are representative of the population of Minnesota.
All right, Mark, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Welcome back. This November, there is an open U.S. Senate seat on the ballot in Minnesota. That's because current U.S. Senator Tina Smith is not seeking re-election here in 2026. There's competition both on the DFL side and the GOP side for their party's nomination for the seat. And as a part of our candidate interviews, we sat down with David Hann, one of the candidates on the GOP side. He was the former state party chair in Minnesota. We talked with him about his campaign. So I'd like to start by asking you, you've served in a lot of different areas. You've been in the legislature, of course, state party chair. Why make the run for U.S. Senate?
I think my life, I've dedicated most of my adult life to serving our country, my community, our state. I was in the Army as a young man, served as a school board member when my kids were young. That led me into the state Senate. Also served as the leader of the Minnesota Township Association for a few years and then state party chair. So I've always believed that in this country, in this kind of government, you need people who are willing to step up, willing to serve if they have the ability to do that, the time to do it. And those different roles have given me a great opportunity to learn things and to try to help make our state a little better. And that's really what politics is about. It's about what can we do that is going to make our lives as citizens a little better. It's not about achieving utopia. It's not about creating a perfect society, but it's about trying to make things better. Had the chance to do that. And I looked at the opportunity for the United States Senate and the kinds of difficulties that we're experiencing here in Minnesota, fraud, of course, being a big issue. Well, there's a federal component to that, clearly. The money that was stolen was federal money. And we've got a massive entitlement welfare system that is managed through the federal government, distributing money to states. That needs to be reevaluated, I believe. It needs to be looked at more closely. Americans are incredibly generous people. We want to help our neighbors. We want to help our fellow citizens. But the real question is the structure that we've put in place really designed to do that effectively? Is it really helping people? I think that's open to challenge. And as we've seen, if you've got massive amounts of money, hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars being stolen, and nobody seems to be watching to make sure that money is being spent for the purposes that it's intended to, it's time to take a hard look at that. And that's really what drew me into becoming a candidate.
If you were elected to the U.S. Senate, to what extent would you support the president's agenda?
Politics is a team sport, especially in a legislative body, and you have to work together with other people in your party, if you will, to get anything done. That doesn't mean you can't work with people on the other side. You have to do that as well. But as a legislator serving in the Minnesota Senate, I served under Governor Tim Pawlenty for 8 years and then under Governor Dayton. And in both cases, I didn't agree with either one of them 100% of the time. I tell people I've been married 44 years. I don't even agree with my wife 100% of the time. I think one of the things that you do as a legislator is you bring your own experience and your own knowledge and your abilities to come to bear on the issues that you face. You have a constitutional system, you've got 3 branches of government, they're co-equal, they all have a job to do. As a member of the United States Senate, I would take that very seriously, the same way I took my membership in the Minnesota State Senate very seriously, which means that you use your judgment on the issues that are before you and make the best decision for the people that you serve.
It's no secret a Republican hasn't won statewide in Minnesota in 20 years. The president's approval ratings have slipped since the start of his second term. How would a Republican win a U.S. Senate race right now in Minnesota?
The opportunity is in front of us. We've seen such terrible governance on the part of Democrat leaders in the state in the last 8 years, certainly. The fraud, the failures of our school system, the rejection of common sense law enforcement, the driving out of businesses from this state, all due to Democrat policies that are very misguided. Republicans, I believe, need to make an appeal to voters who have perhaps in the past found themselves more likely to vote for Democrats. But this is an election where we think we have the opportunity to make the case that Republicans can serve their interests better. I think most independent voters, well, probably all voters, they want government that works. They want government that works effectively. And when you have an administration that ignored all the signals, all the signs, pointing to massive theft of public monies, and they did nothing. When you look at an administration that has failed to do the things that common sense people expect in terms of improving our education system, or when you look at the things they've done to drive away business, make it more difficult for people to invest and grow businesses and create jobs for others. When you look at all those things, those aren't necessarily partisan issues, but I think they're issues that affect everyday voters. And we believe that many of those voters who in the past, as I said, may have inclined to vote for Democrats, this year, they're going to be frustrated with the lack of attention that Democrats have paid in this state to the very basic things that government entails. Republicans can do better, we can do better, and we'll show them that and we'll earn their support.
One of the big issues in Washington right now, of course, is connected to Minnesota and immigration enforcement. There's been discussion for weeks, of course, about how much Homeland Security and ICE should be funded. Were you supportive of the Republican-led Congress adding those billions of dollars in enforcement money for ICE and federal agents?
Yes, absolutely. I think the president was elected in 2024 largely on the issue of enforcing the law. We had an administration under President Biden that essentially said we're not going to enforce any immigration law. It's going to be just a free-for-all. Anybody who wants to can come in for whatever purpose. And we were flooded with all kinds of bad actors. Nobody seemed to care. We've got a number of them here in Minnesota. They're all over the country. The president, when his campaign said, look, we're going to enforce the law. We're going to enforce the immigration law, and we're going to deal with this, and we're going to make it better. We're going to close the border, and he's doing that. There's nothing remarkable about that. That's what presidents are supposed to do. They're supposed to enforce the law. It's remarkable that you've got political leaders and the Democrats here in Minnesota that are saying, well, we don't like the law, so we don't think you should enforce it. In fact, you should get out, stop enforce. This is just like the whole movement to defund the police after the George Floyd riots. That's a remarkable position for a political leader to take, that you should not enforce the law just because you don't like it. I wonder if they've got a list of laws that Republicans should not follow if Democrats become in charge of the government. Is there a list of laws that Republicans should just disobey and fight against? But the fact that they are encouraging people to go out in the streets, obstruct law enforcement, make it more difficult, has created massive problems. I think it's a good sign that recently we've seen Tom Homan come to Minnesota, talk about if we got better cooperation from local law enforcement, some of the things that have happened, the tensions would be diminished. That has to happen. I agree that it should happen. But this idea that somehow we are not going to enforce the law because we don't like it, where are the Democrats in their proposals to fix the law that they say they don't like? I haven't seen Amy Klobuchar, Angie Craig, anybody say, well, we don't like this aspect of immigration law, so here's my proposal about how to make it better. seen anything like that. Their response is, no, just don't enforce the law, have law enforcement go home. That's going to make us safer? Are you kidding me? You've got criminals roaming the streets here. I think you need to have somebody paying attention to making sure they get rounded up and dealt with appropriately.
There are some Republicans, even at the state level in Minnesota, who've really expressed discomfort over the way the Trump administration has handled the immigration operations here in Minnesota. If you were in the Senate right now, would you be lockstep with the president in the way this has been carried out?
Whenever you have an effort like this, and especially an effort that's being so actively opposed by Democratic leaders in Minnesota, encouraging people to break the law, encouraging people to obstruct law enforcement, it's always going to become more difficult to do. Fundamentally, we need to enforce the laws that we have, and if we think the laws are not appropriate, we need to fix them. And that's what I would do as a United States Senator. I would say we have to enforce the laws as they are, and if we want to make them better, let's work to make them better.
Going back to the campaign, on the Republican side, there are a couple of other candidates with some name recognition. Of course, Royce White, who ran previously, and then Michelle Tafoya, who's well known in this area. Speaking to Republican voters and activists right now, what would make you the choice in your mind over those two?
Republican voters, primary voters, are very knowledgeable people. They pay attention. They want to see a candidate who stands up for the values that they believe in, that the Republican Party believes in. I'm the only candidate in the race that has ever been elected to anything at all, and been elected a number of times. The only candidate that's been involved in any kind of political leadership at a couple of different levels, who's taken hundreds of votes, stood for hundreds of taken hundreds of positions, taken some very tough votes, defended those positions publicly, and continue to do so. It's not a single thing that I have walked away from. And so they know my record. They know what I believe. They know my political philosophy. They know what I do, and they know how I do it. None of the other candidates can say that. And when you talk about a primary election, what you want, I believe voters want, is a candidate that they know and trust. You get elected for 6 years to the United States Senate. You can say, well, there's this issue going on right now, but what are going to be the issues in 4 years and 5 years? And what will the judgment be brought to those issues by somebody if we don't know what they've done in the past? That's the advantage that I believe I have over the other candidates, is simply that I am known by primary voters, known by people of the state of Minnesota, across the state. I do have a reputation. They do know who I am. They know the positions I've taken, and they know how I operate. And those things, I think, are incredibly important to primary voters.
I hear Republicans often talk about fraud, and they talk about the administration's handling it over here in Minnesota. But at the federal level, what types of ideas, what types of legislation could you work on that would actually tackle the issue? Give me some specifics on that.
There's a couple of things that could be done. One would be to make sure that the federal monies that are distributed have some mechanisms in place to assure that those monies get spent properly, and perhaps some consequences if they're not very clearly spelled out, that if this money is not used for the purposes it's designed to be used, maybe there's some penalties that could be brought forth. But beyond that, and more broadly, I think there needs to be an opportunity for us to step back and say, are these welfare policies really the best way to help people? When these were started in the Great Society era back in Johnson's term when he was president, I can remember as a young child hearing things like, well, it's not a handout, it's a hand up. We're trying to make sure that people who receive help from the government are going to be able to reestablish themselves as independent citizens and live their lives independently. Unfortunately, that has changed over a number of years as this has gone on. We've seen now 80-some programs, trillions of dollars every year being spent on these programs. Democrats, I think, very cynically have gotten the message that they can use this for their own political advantage. Their job is not to get people off of the welfare systems, not to get them off of these programs. It is to get more people on them, and you see this all the time. Broadening the scope of who it's applied to, broadening the benefit structures, making it easier for people. They want people to become dependent on these federal programs, and they want to make sure that the voters understand that they, as Democrats, are going to continue to provide the money and they're going to continue to provide the channel of dependency to citizens. And you can't rely on Republicans to do that. That system, very cynical, not designed for the purpose it was originally intended, not to try to help make citizens independent and be able to be productive on their own, but to try to create a dependency on a political party. Very cynical, very wrong. That needs to be reevaluated, and it needs to be looked at. What can we do? We want to help people? Let's help people. Let's make sure we're helping people. Let's make sure we're not creating conditions that allow people or encourage people to become dependent on government assistance, but how can we make them become independent, productive, and better citizens? That's the goal. I'm open to any kinds of suggestions and working with anybody on either side of the aisle to accomplish those things.
Mr. Hann, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us this week on KARE 11 on the Record. Remember, you can stream us every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. on KARE 11 Plus and find every episode on demand.